All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, I guess good morning, depending upon what side of the country you're on. I am Lori Brednick. I'm the CEO and founder of HR Company Store. I don't know what happened to my little screen there. There we go. That is better. Really nice to meet all of you. I will be hosting this awesome webinar for you today. HR Company Store, if you've not heard of it, we are an Angie's List model for the HR professional. Highly recommend that each of you go out and register for our site, rate and review the vendors that you do business with, and donate money to charity. Every review we get online provides $1 to 2 great charities. So today I would like to introduce you to our fantastic folks that we're going to be speaking with. We have LT Ladino Bryson. She is the CEO and founder of V-Candidates. And Brandy Ferrer, I can never say your last name, Brandy.
Ferrer.
Ferrer, thank you. I've only practiced it for the last 5 minutes. Brandy Ferrer from Pathfinder-Strategies. So ladies, Brandy, let's start with you. If you'd be so kind and give us just a brief overview of who you are and what you're all about, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in the organizational development space for about 15 years, and in that doing a lot of work around leadership development, team alignment, and culture. And I founded Pathfinder-Strategies about 8 years ago. And our primary driver is to help our clients create workplaces where people want to come to work and they can perform at their best. So that means a lot of work around getting teams on the same page, helping leaders develop internally, and improving retention.
Perfect. Awesome. How about you, LT? Give us a brief synopsis of who you are and why you are as amazing as you are.
Well, I'm the CEO and founder of vcandidates.com. We are an end-to-end career platform that assists recruiters with talent search. We help develop job seekers into viable candidates, and we also help employers complete their employee life cycle with an offboarding solution. I have been a recruiter for 8 years. I've placed personally over 600 candidates within a 5-year period before embarking on putting together this career platform. I'm really excited to be here and help host this platform that's so topical.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So one quick housekeeping item before we get started today. You may note that you are on mute. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box. If we're not able to get to them by the end of the presentation, we will definitely commit to getting back to each and every one of you. So we really do appreciate your time today. And now let's get started. All right, we already talked about our amazing panelists. So Brandy, let's get started with you. So what is meant by evolving company culture?
Yeah, so when we talk about evolution, what we're talking about is the process of change from one form to another, and change in a positive way and having better results on the other side of that change. And that definition applies to company culture as well. So when we talk about evolving your culture, we're talking about meaningful, sustainable change, not just, pretty words on a wall or, messaging on a website. We're talking about things that we can see behaviorally. So for example, if your company values learning and growth, my question to you would be, that's great. Do you have a tuition reimbursement policy in place? Do you have an internal professional development program? What are some things that you're doing to make sure that you're aligning your values as you hire people? So it's really all of that. It's change that can be seen in policy and procedure and behaviorally as well.
Awesome. That is a great explanation of that concept of evolving that company culture. So thank you so much. And if I can evolve and get this, we'll be doing good. All right. Now, why is now the time to make that cultural change?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on right now, in case you haven't noticed. So there are a few big drivers, one of which is COVID, of course. So the way that we live and the way that we work is not the same today as it was 6 months ago. If you would have said to me, hey, Brandy, 2020 is going to be awesome. You're going to work from home exclusively. Your spouse is going to work from home. And OPS, by the way, you're also going to be managing your kids' learning because she's going to school at home. I would have lost my mind and told you you were crazy. But here we are, right? That's our reality. So the way that we work has changed dramatically. We're also in a moment of social change. So since the death of George Floyd, we've seen protests, we've seen an uprising, and that's really sparking conversations in the workplace that either weren't necessarily happening before, or they weren't happening to the same degree. So with that, we're seeing that the workforce is driving conversation and change in the workplace. And leaders are, many leaders are being responsive to that. We're also seeing that some companies are embracing this social responsibility. So a lot of companies are coming out and making statements about racism and diversity and equity and inclusion, and they're changing how they spend their money and how they allocate their resources. So there's kind of a lot going on right now. And I guess the real question is, if now is not the time to make change, make meaningful cultural change, then when is?
All right, so that as I think about that, a very big question comes to mind. Why now? Why at this moment is all this happening? More importantly, why didn't it happen before?
Yeah. So I'm going to quote LT for a second, and basically say that the truth of the matter is, we dropped the ball. We weren't doing a good job having these conversations and making these changes before. Right now, what we're seeing is critical mass, right? So we're seeing that in the media, and really everywhere you go, these are some of the things that are being talked about, and that wasn't necessarily the case before. So we didn't really do a very good job around diversity, inclusion, and equity before. We have an opportunity to do a better job going forward.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think your answer was absolutely amazing, and I heard none of it. My entire system just completely shut my volume down. I'm like, why did that happen?
Oh, no.
Technology is great until it's not. We'll just go from there. We're just going to say that your answer was phenomenal. How's that?
Well, thank you. We'll go with that.
Perfect. All right, let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
Leadership plays a significant role in advocating for and supporting cultural change. How can leaders drive that meaningful change?
Yep. So there's a couple different things that leaders can do. So the first thing that you'll see there is communicate, right? So when I talk about communication in this context, I'm not talking about, okay, all the leaders and the board of directors are going to go away for a weekend retreat. They're going to come back and they're going to be like, okay, here's our new values, or here's our model for culture that we want to follow. That doesn't work. And it doesn't work because that's a broadcast. There's a missed opportunity for conversation there. So it's really important when you talk about making these changes that leaders are inviting other people into the conversation. There was a credit union here who did such a good job. They recognized early on in the COVID days that, man, things are changing, and we really want to look at who we are as a company and how we operate and the things that are important to us. So they started to have these conversations at that leadership level. And then they said, you know what, we can't make these decisions on our own. We need to take this conversation and we need to have it with our teams. And that's exactly what they did. So it was interesting. They took all of this information back and they started to find some patterns. And just as an example, one of the patterns that they found was employees said, hey, look, we say that we're family oriented. We say that we have all these family values, yet our healthcare costs are so expensive to cover our kids and our spouse that we can't do it. So that's a very tangible piece that the leadership was like, okay, we're going to work toward doing something better there. And that's a big cultural piece. Modify behavior. So, here's the thing. You could have an amazing set of values, and you could be doing some great work around changing your culture. You could be updating your policies and your hiring practices and checking all those boxes. But if you have a leader who's like, nah, I don't need to change anything and I'm not going to support anything. Hey, HR, why don't you go ahead and deal with this? If that's the case, then it's not going to work. And all of that investment and time and effort that you're putting forward is not going to make a meaningful, sustainable change. Leaders have to be on board with that. And not just, yeah, hey, we support it. They have to show that behaviorally. And then finally, leaders need to be able to champion the systems that sustain a healthy culture. And what I mean by that, I'll use accountability as an example. So if your company says, we really value accountability, we want to be a culture of accountability, that's great. But my question would then be, okay, so how are you incorporating accountability into your competency models and performance reviews? Do managers know how to have coaching conversations with their employees around what accountable behavior looks like? Is there training so that people understand, hey, I'm on the front lines and I'm interfacing with customers on a day-to-day basis. What exactly does accountability mean in my role? So those are all pieces that have to be in place to sustain cultural change.
Well, it's a couple things come to mind. When you first talked about communicate, it really is, I like to say there is a reason you have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah.
A lot of that change is really driven by listening to your folks and understanding their perspective. Mm-hmm. So I completely agree with you on that communication piece. I definitely think it's interesting as you talk about championing the systems and the leadership and their role in all of this. And I believe part of it, and let me know if you agree, that if you want to have, a transparent environment, your leadership team needs to be super objective and introspective. Yes. Like they have to understand that it may be them that is the problem here.
Yeah.
And in your experience with the leaders that you've worked with, have they recognized that their behavior has been maybe somehow contributed to the crazy, so to speak?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. That's a really great question, Lori. So it's really interesting. A lot of times when I start working with clients, we go through a needs assessment process. And so we talk with the leaders, and oftentimes leaders have a very specific idea of what they think needs to be done or what they think the challenges are. But when you go and you talk to people on the front lines or you talk to people in middle management, you get a broader picture, right? And sometimes those pictures don't align. So part of what I do as a consultant is help share those perspectives. And a lot of times there is a lack of self-awareness on the leadership level. Now, most of the time, once that sort of comes to light, leaders will say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. That's a blind spot for me. Thank you for pointing it out. How can we work on this? So for the most part, I think that people are receptive, but they're called blind spots for a reason, right? Because we don't know that they exist.
Well, it's really good to hear that the leaders you've worked with have been receptive. That definitely leads to a lot of hope that if an HR person were to bring this in, that they wouldn't be sliced down immediately. So that's great news to hear. Okay, our next question. Tell us about some changes that you're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, so I'll share with you an example from a retail operation who has done some really amazing work. When their states there in Arizona, when the state first shut down as a result of COVID, their retail operations, so they were deemed non-essential, and they ended up having to lay quite a few people off. So once the governor said, hey, we're going to start to reopen, they were like, we gotta get a hiring plan in place. We have to get this done quickly. And they needed to hire 200 people, hire and train 200 people in like a 3-week span of time. So there was a big rush, but they decided what they were going to do. And this was their leadership team, including their VP of HR. What they decided they were going to do is slow down. They said, okay, well, let's really look at our hiring process because, we've had some turnover, pretty significant turnover issues in the past. Now is a really good opportunity to address some of those issues in our hiring process. So they really revised their hiring process. They added an assessment. They changed the structure, and they incorporated a lot more questions to kind of understand how candidates fit in terms of do they align with a company's values? Are they going to be a good cultural contributor? So they had all of those pieces lined up. The other thing that they did was kind of cool was they recognized that the people that were left, right, the people who, for lack of a better term, survived the layoff, they recognized that these people were scrappy, They were stepping up to the plate. They were the sort of creme de la creme. And they said, you know what, we want to bring in some of these people in the interview process because in part, we want to build our next teams around these individuals. We want to bring in people that are a complement to them. So they did all of those things. They ended up hiring the 200 people that they were looking to hire. So it's a little early to see what their success is going to be like, but I will share this statistic with you. You know, typically when they go through a big hiring process, they lose between 12 and 15% of those individuals very early on, like before they even complete training. With this new process they put in place, they've only lost 3% of the people who went through the training. So they're seeing really good results sort of early on, and it's been great. But they took this as an opportunity to make some significant changes to how they were hiring to make sure that their values really were carried through in the culture of their organization.
You know what? Sometimes just taking a beat, slowing down, and figuring it out, it makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
Lori, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think we skipped a couple questions.
No, I actually was going to reach, I actually had them before we were going to move over to LT. No worries.
Awesome. You're all over it, of course.
So from a leadership, when they're being objective and they're going in, they're re-looking at their culture, you know, it's kind of hard to see the forest through the trees. So at the end of the day, is it better or worse for them to bring in an outside consultant? Like, where do you see that the value add is? Where's the ROI? And really, how does an outside consulting firm help them through that journey?
Absolutely. So, you know, I think you hit the nail on the head, Lori, when you talked about being able to see the forest from the trees. So it's very easy for me to talk about cultural change and the things that need to go along with that. Because I don't have my head down working on 17,000 other projects like most of us do. So part of the value in bringing in the consultant is you do get those perspectives, and you get those perspectives across the organization. And a lot of times what I have found is that individuals are, it's kind of like, I think LT talks a little bit about this. You know, you're like the counselor. So I'll pull up the chair and I'll say, so tell me everything. So we get a much broader perspective. Also, we recognize that, hey, you're busy. So as consultants, a consultant's job is to come in, partner with you, and make your life easier. One of the things that we do is when we're working with a client, our goal is not to come in and recreate the wheel. Our goal is to come in, really focus on those 5 aspects of culture, right? Your values, your hiring process, the employee experience, team alignment, and leadership development. We say, what do you have? And then let's work with what you have. So we're not recreating the wheel. And then let's get you to a place where you've got the systems in place, you've got the accountability in place, everyone understands their roles and responsibilities so that the consultant leaves and those changes can be sustainable.
So I'm going to throw you a curveball because I have another question that was in my brain as I was sitting here. So we started this off talking about evolving. Well, evolving is not evolved. Like, it's a journey, not a destination, so to speak. So when an outside consultant comes in and they start taking a look exactly all the things you just discussed, how long is a typical contract for? Is it, you know, a month? Is it 3 months? Is it 6? Is it a 1 to 2 year relationship? I mean, it is a relationship. So kind of help us walk through what that would actually look like for an HR professional if they were going through the process of engaging an outside culture consultant.
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on what the client needs. You know, again, those 5 pieces that I mentioned, those are the cultural drivers. So a lot of times we'll work with clients and we'll say, okay, we want to do a needs assessment on these 5 areas. And we'll find that 4 out of the 5 areas are working fairly well. So we might need to just focus on one particular area. We might just need to focus on leadership development and make sure that's tied into everything else. That doesn't have to be a super long engagement. That can be a 3-month engagement, again, depending on where the client is and what they're looking for. We have a client right now who called us and said, we need the whole thing. we need everything. And they're actually experiencing some significant changes in leadership, and they've had some turnover issues, and they've got a lot of things going on. So our engagement with them is a year in length.
Awesome. Well, we have a few more minutes left with you, Brandy. Is there anything, other words of wisdom or other information that you think we should share with this group, before we move on with the LT's portion?
Yeah, there is one thing that I want to mention, and I know we talked about leadership's responsibility in shaping and supporting cultural change, but I also want to mention that to kind of boil down culture, what we're really talking about is what are the set of accepted behaviors within your organization, good, bad, and otherwise. And so when you think about it from that perspective, every single individual has some degree of responsibility in shaping the culture, right? So it's very easy to say, well, leadership's not on board. If I'm a team leader, if I'm a manager and I look at leadership and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're really not, they're not walking the walk, right? I still have a responsibility as a team leader to myself and to my team to live those company values and to do my part in modeling the behavior that supports the company culture and supports what those values are, even if my leader is not doing the same thing. So I think there's accountability throughout.
I like to look at culture as in a tree or a flower. Mm-hmm. The culture is really what's under the ground. Yeah. It's the root system. It's what's really dug into the earth, positive or negative. And that really helps, decide whether you're going to have a flower or a weed.
I like that analogy. I'm totally going to borrow that from you.
Great analogy.
Yeah.
I just pulled that one out of the sky. You like how we do things. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brandy. I mean, that was a wealth of information, so we really do appreciate it. So at this point, I would like to just, we're going to move forward. I'm going to talk to LT a little bit. And we have a lot of amazingly complicated and challenging questions for you, LT. Are you ready?
I am up for the challenge.
Awesome. So what's the relationship between an external recruiter and the company culture?
It's really interesting because with all of the AI today and all the different software and platforms that are used to remove the relationship of the external recruiter, people don't realize that it is the external recruiter that helps actually define your company culture. Like I said, I've placed over 600 people. And every time that I was able to make a hire, I had thoroughly, checked that candidate to make sure that not only were they skilled and talented for the role, but that they matched the company culture so that they could be successful within their role. And we're literally a matchmaker. Right? It's a big game of concentration that we play where we might come across a candidate from, in one time, and it might not be an opportunity available for them until much later. So we are constantly looking and speaking with people, but we're also looking to see how we define that company culture, because guess what? We're not bound by, the sensitivities that some companies have had in the past. Right? If you give me a job order for $120,000, my job is to find a candidate that has the skill set and talents to match what your requirement and to see how they exceed what is needed. And then I'm going to go and get them $140,000. And it doesn't matter what color they are, what gender they are, it's about finding that talent. So we're really good at helping define the D&I resource. We're very helpful in making sure that we screen these candidates, because there are markers within our contract that, hey, they've got to at least get past a certain period of extending. So if anything goes wrong, we have to replace them. Our reputations are on the line, and we want to do the best job for that client as possible, because then we were able to assist them with other openings.
Okay, so I have to ask, if you're responsible for contributing to or defining that company culture, how do you figure out what the culture is in the first place to make sure the people that you're pulling in either help them, they complement where they are today, or help them evolve to where they want to be tomorrow?
That's a great question. And like any relationship, it is up to a very skilled recruiter to build a firm relationship with their client. even if it's the first time. So we really have to kind of get to know each other. The same way that if you're dating, you want to get to know if this person is viable as a romantic interest. You want to find out the little nuances of that hiring manager, what their preferences are as far as what they like to do when they wind down. See if there's any commonality. You know, it's really interesting. I like to have all of my candidates put a fun fact on their resume. And the reason why is because it's known that 60% of when we hire someone, 60% of that is based on their skill and talent, but 40% is based on likability. So I had a scenario where a CFO, very button up, proper gentleman, when I asked him, tell me something interesting. What do you like to do on your off time? He was fighting me tooth and nail because he was embarrassed to say, I like to paint miniature horses. For him, it was a way to help calm the white noise in his head and to actually bring him to a place in which he was centered. And I said, let's just say you're an avid horse lover. Well, I submitted that resume to my client. In 20 minutes, he was booked for an interview. When he sat down with the CEO, they spoke about 40 minutes about horses. And when he walked into the CEO's office, there were equestrian pictures and his kids rode. So there was some kind of commonality that connected them. For me and my team, I asked everyone, hey, you like football? What's your favorite team? Because unlike other cultures where people want to hire and say we're a big family, I don't do that because I think families are dysfunctional. That's me. I like to run my company like a professional sports team. The quarterback is never trying to be the running back, right? The quarterback is not trying to, be the water boy. Everyone has a role and they do their role well. So, it's really important that people understand you've got to get to know who you're servicing. And without that, there's no way you can do a good job.
All right. Can I throw you a curveball?
Always.
Okay. So what is the value proposition of the outside external recruiter versus the internal recruiter as it comes to the words of company culture?
I love this. The biggest value proposition is that as an external recruiter, I'm not bound between the four walls of the company. There's so many different terms in this HR department. You got the HR managers, you've got the talent acquisition, you've got the recruiters. And it's really confusing because the recruiter inside of a company, their job is to basically screen. They're sourcers. They have found someone and they're screening them all the way through. Now, depending on the size of the company, sometimes that recruiter might have a little bit more input. But the realistic thing is, as an outside or an external recruiter, I'm acting as an agent for that candidate, right? Think of it like an agent for a sports figure. I'm there to give you the ins and outs. This is, what you're looking to find. It's not going to be a good match for you. I'm really focused on the needs of the candidate, whereas the internal focus on the needs of the client.
Interesting perspective. All right. Now let's go to our next question here. So what does diversity mean?
I can tell you what it doesn't mean, okay? It's a trigger word right now, especially in these times. Diversity is seen as a label of a protected class. For a lot of people, when they see diversity, they see the word Black. Diversity simply means that you're going to be included seated at the table if you have the skill set, no matter your gender, your culture, your age, your political differences, okay? So no one wants to go into a company and be the token, the only person like them. We don't want to see a company where their executive team has one female, right? We want to see a mixture. It would be like eating a spinach salad that's just spinach, right? It's the walnuts, it's the apples, it's the dressing. That gives it that variety of life. But even more so, I want you to hit that video, that image. It should play a video.
I am not Black. I mean, that's what the world calls me, but it's not me. I didn't come out of my mother's womb saying, hey, everybody, I'm Black. No, I was taught to be Black, and you were taught to call me that. along with whatever you call yourself, is just a label. See, from birth, the world force feeds us these labels. And eventually we all swallow them. We digest and accept the labels, never ever doubting them. But there's one problem. Labels are not you and labels are not me. Labels are just labels. But who we truly are is not skin deep. See, when I drive my car, no one would ever confuse the car for me. Well, when I drive my body, why do you confuse me for my body? It's my body. Get it? Not me. Let me break it down. See, our bodies are just cars that we operate and drive around. The dealership we call society decided to label mine the black edition, yours the Irish or white edition. And with no money down, 0% APR, and no test drive, we were forced to own these cars for the rest of our lives. Forgive me, but I fail to see the logic or pride in defining myself or judging another by the cars we drive. Because who we truly are is found inside. Listen, I'm not here to tell you how science has concluded that genetically we're all mixed and race in the human species doesn't exist, or how every historian knows that race was invented in the 15th century to divide people from each other and it has worked perfectly. No, I'm not here to lecture. I just want to ask one question. Who would you be if the world never gave you a label? Never gave you a box to check? Would you be white, black, Mexican, Asian, Native American, Middle Eastern, Indian? No, we would be one. We would be together. No longer living in the era of calling human beings black people or white people. These labels that will forever blind us from seeing a person for who they are, but instead seeing them through the judgmental, prejudicial, artificial filters of who we think they are. And when you let an artificial label define yourself, then my friend, you have chosen smallness over greatness and minimized yourself, confined and divided yourself from others. And it is an undeniable fact that where there is division, there will be conflict, and conflict starts wars. Therefore, every war has started over labels. It's always us versus them. So the answer to war, racism, sexism, and every other ism is so simple that every politician has missed it. It's the labels. We must rip them off. Isn't it funny how no baby is born racist, yet every baby cries when they hear the cries of another, no matter the gender, culture, or color, proving that deep down we were meant to connect and care for each other. That is our mission, and that is not my opinion. That is the truth. In a world that has sold us fiction, please listen, labels only distort our vision, which is why half of those watching this will dismiss it or feel resistance and conflicted. But just remember, so did the caterpillar. Before it broke through its shell and became the magnificent butterfly. Well, these labels are our shells, and we must do the same thing so we can finally spread our wings. Human beings were not meant to be slapped with labels like groceries and supermarkets. DNA cannot be regulated by the FDA. We were meant to be free, and only until we remove them all and stop living and thinking so small will we be free to see ourselves and each other for who we truly are.
Absolutely love that, LT. That was awesome.
I hope people can see that and understand there was one line that was so amazing that said, I'm so sorry, that literally said, we are not to be like the products in a grocery store, right, with a label.
Yeah.
And so what's happened is that diversity was never defined correctly. And so that's why it kind of fell by the wayside. And now that it's coming back into this big lump of dust under a rug that we have to remove and deal with, we still are misconstruing what the word is meant for. So you have a group of people that feel like when they hear the word diversity, they're not included in an opportunity, which is not the case. And that's something that external recruiters, we don't have an issue with overlooking this. And that's how you actually help define your company culture. Thank you.
Awesome. That video was amazing. I'm definitely posting that on all of my social media channels as it just gets to the heart of the conversation.
And I'll make sure that I put it in the chat box for anybody that needs to share that.
Perfect.
They have
Thank
it
you so
available
much.
to them.
All right. Now if my computer will cooperate and allow me to turn the page, we will go to the next question. So how do you attract a diverse team of applicants if the applicants aren't diverse?
You have to widen your net. If you continually go to the same source and hoping, and skill sets, depending on what you're hiring for, can be very intricate. If you're only going to one set segment, you're going to miss out on other very capable people. This is why we say you have to go and look at traditional outlets, right? If you're looking for very talented graphic designers, you have to put that out, not only on the social media, not only on some of the job boards, but you're going to want to go into certain groups where those graphic designers are hanging out, right? You want to utilize employees. I was working with a client and they said, we just can't get people to come to our own team. And we're a recruiting firm that are of diverse backgrounds. And we feel guilty about that. And I said, no, you have a great testament. You've got cheerleaders inside your organization who can reach their tentacles out. And that's the employee, to stretch themselves to say, listen, I work for a great company. We're looking for people, and have that go across their social media and everything that helps attract people. But most importantly, we are all taught a certain English vernacular, and it speaks, to a certain segment of the population. There are certain words that literally are not inviting to women and minorities. So I think HR people have to look at their job descriptions first and foremost and say, what am I conveying in what I'm saying? Yeah, sometimes I try to be hip and cool, but words like manager is off-putting. And if you pepper your job description with, we're looking for a manager, we need a manager, we trust a manager, it's going to kind of shut a person down. But using the words team leader is more inviting and open. And I can give you a brief description. I had a friend, she was a lawyer and she went into financial and worked very successfully in finance for years, as well as owned her own company. When she decided to go back into the workforce, she sent over this amazing opportunity that she found. I reread it and said, it's perfect for you. And she said, you know what? I think I'm not going to go for it. And I said, well, why? She said, because they're looking for someone technically minded, and I don't know how to code. Now, this is a highly intelligent woman with tons of education. It wasn't that she didn't understand what technically minded was, but she did. They were simply asking for someone analytical. And as an attorney, that's her nature, right? But here was this beautiful Black woman who could bring so much to the table. She decided to walk away from an opportunity because they did not convey the job description correctly.
Awesome. Well, did she wind up going for the job and did she get it? I have to know.
She did not go for the job. I tried to convince her. She did not go for the job.
Okay.
So I was like, well, I think it's stupid that they didn't put analytical in there. So we have to look at, when we open up that net, how we're conveying and speaking to someone, and it's not like, if you are trying to say we need a more diverse team members, and we know that there's an expertise of a way of thinking, because for my company, we have no discrimination as far as age, culture, political differences, even football teams, right? So when I have a conversation with my team, guess what? I'm getting information and intel based on people that have had experience, maybe highly educated, as well as those who have these slumdog millionaire experiences like myself. Makes us more well-rounded, right?
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
Not that I really want you to give away any of your trade secrets, but for this group of folks, as they're looking for talent in a not so diverse group of people, like for example, if I'm looking for IT folks, I don't necessarily have to go to Silicon Valley.
Nope.
So perhaps you can give maybe one little tip or trick of other places specifically that folks can go to find some pretty decent talent that they wouldn't necessarily think to look.
For your example, with people thinking that they only can go to San Francisco to find great talent for tech, guess what? I would look at the new tech hubs that are rising up, like Phoenix, Austin, Charlotte, and advertise in those areas and be prepared to relocate a very talented person. I'd also look into certain, again, clubs, meetup groups. Go find people that have the same commonality that you're trying to hire, and you'll extend your reach. That's all I'm saying.
I have to say, at this point, you don't have to worry about relocation because everybody's working from home.
Exactly. But if there is a call for someone to be on site, you're going to have to. You can't say, hey, I'm going to hire you from Charlotte. Now you got to get yourself here. That's not fair.
No, absolutely right. I was thinking more the programmer side where everybody can literally be virtual because guess what? We all pretty much are.
That's true.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Given the current state of the talent market, what are some of the opportunities for employers?
The course correction has changed so much that employers now have the opportunity to really look at their operations and define where there's overlap in, opportunities as well as any overlap in workload and lighten that load, right? That's what something the pandemic has done. Because employers right now, we have to be smart to say, we've gone through this, we're now starting to get back on, but what if there's a second or third or fourth shutdown? How are we going to survive that? So this is something that employers have to look at. They're going to have to look at, again, those new avenues to find talent and be open to it and be open to that talent coming and having a seat at a table where they can be valued and heard. And that's something that has been a big issue in the past. They're going to also want to try to find ways to attract talent and find out those people that are like-minded with their mission, so that they can be as productive and profitable within that company, the skill sets that they bring to the table. For instance, you can have someone hired just because they're Black, right? But if that person is not aligned with the mission and goals, it's never going to be a good fit. And that's where that game of concentration comes in and really, truly vetting that person. Because when a person's interviewing, you have to find out, is this a job to you or is this an extension of your career? Because a job is just something you take until you find something down the road. You want to alleviate that. And if you're clear as an employer that have defined, this is our purpose-driven issues. This is what we stand behind. This is what we mean, and live it and talk it and walk it, it's going to be attractive to others, right? And more importantly, employers right now with any transition that they're doing, and Brandy, I say to your client that is looking to say, I need everything, make sure they close the employee life cycle. Because so many people forget that. We are so good at, onboarding and engaging and management and training and all this great stuff. And when it comes down to transition someone, it's like, bye-bye. And that's not good.
No, I totally agree. You don't want to kick them out the door because they're the ones that are going to negatively impact not only your culture, but also the employees who decided to remain. And how you treat people on the way out really drives how the people who've decided to stay will think and feel about your organization. So you are absolutely right on that. Mm-hmm. So the next question, what kind of impact does a well thought out offboarding program have on the company culture? Glad we just kind of, leaned right into that one.
Yeah, it's the way you would end a relationship. One of my favorite Sex and the City episodes is when Carrie was broken up with a Post-it note. And she was so frustrated because she just wanted something kind to just acknowledge what they had, and even though it has to end. Well, when we were creating vcandidates.com, we actually interviewed 3,000 candidates. And those that were let go, they said, I had worked for a company I put my everything into. I literally celebrated life cycles with them, wins and losses we dealt with. And they treated me as if I was nothing. I was discarded. And like any, disgruntled girlfriend, they'll be fine for a moment until that severance pay runs off. And then they'll start to think about it and their efforts go directly towards who hurt them the last time. And I don't know if companies really understand that company culture never, ever dies. We're all alumni of all the companies we've ever worked for. And how we think about that company is based on how we left. Was it adverse or was it positive, right? When you treat someone well as they're walking out the door, you literally become a brand ambassador. They become a brand ambassador for your company. They can sit there, oh yeah, I used to work there and it was great or not. But you also protect your brand in the marketplace, because there are websites and chat rooms like the layoff.com, like Glassdoor. And because candidates are now so savvy, they are checking who they are interviewing with before they even sit down, because recruiters like me are telling them to do so. What's online really can hurt your company. And it takes a lot of work for recruiters to get that candidate to say, hey, I'm ready to shift, or I'm going to look at this opportunity. It's sad when the company's reputation blows it, because a candidate will say, I'd never work for that company. Please, I'll work for any company. If this job is for this company, I won't. It's just not fair.
I've seen a few of those in my lifetime. So there's definitely a value add of getting a reputation management company to really help you control the message of what your brand is, how it's perceived, and allow you to align your outside image with your inside image. So
even so, I mean, it's great to have someone to build that reputation management, but you have to execute it.
Yeah.
And part of that execution is simply, could be something as nice. I know that Ericsson, when they are interviewing someone, at the top 3 candidates, the person who selected gets the job. The other 2, they literally give a care package to them to say, you know what, this is some products that we like. We know it's not the right time. I mean, how does that make that job seeker feel? It makes them feel a little bit better, even though it didn't happen maybe later. The same thing goes for when someone is leaving, to be able to show a token of, we appreciate you. Right now, COVID's happening. It's not our fault. But to get on an email or webinar like this for 1,500 people and say, you guys are all fired, we got to let you go, there's nothing nice in that. So we like to suggest, and what we do at vcandidates.com, we actually help people transition more so than just an outplacement package that goes to the directors. We have an offboarding supplement subscription that helps package people and help them get through a very heightened anxiety time, because being laid off is so that you go through the roof. You feel like I'm not good enough, right?
Yep. I mean, at the end of the day, you want your inside culture and your outside reputation to match. Otherwise, it's really nothing more than putting lipstick on a pig.
Exactly. It's like having a LinkedIn picture and a Snapchat, which hanging out at the bar.
There you go. Yeah, they don't quite go together. All right. So we have just a few minutes left. So I was wondering, LT, if you had any, closing words of wisdom, any final thoughts for our audience to really help inspire them over the next phase of all of this.
I really think it's important for people to literally take stock in what they have, to go deep inward. Don't, companies have been saying all these statements of what they're going to do and their, inclusion and diversity, and your customers are watching you. We know if it's fake or not. There have been companies that came out with statements that actual employees within the company quit because they knew that it was fraudulent. They knew that it was not sincere. And the customers are looking now. Customers are looking at if you want me to buy this Coke can Coke, what are you doing to support people that mirror me in your corporation? And whether it's Black, white, Latino, whatever, that's what it is. And I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how things move forward. But if employers and HR directors and C-level executives can kind of get real, it's going to be magnanimous on the other side.
Perfect. So Brandy, do you have any final thoughts after listening to all of the things that LT just laid out?
Yeah, I think LT has done a really, really great job of kind of walking through some of these really important pieces as it pertains to both the hiring part of it on the front side of things, and then on the back side of things and closing that life cycle. I think we've talked a little bit about diversity and inclusion and equity and labels and stuff today. And, I really think one of the things to take away is when you think about your organization, you think about your teams, you think about your leadership team, the power of the team is its diversity, right? It is your competitive advantage. And I think it's up to leaders to coach and to kind of show employees what that looks like, right? What are you, Lori, bringing to the table that's special? What is your diversity and background and experience and talent? LT, what are you bringing to the table? Because our job as a team is to leverage those unique things and to make the team and to make the organization better than, you know, its parts.
Perfect. So one last question for both of you. As you take a look at the company cultures, you know, I believe that the rating and review website, obviously I believe in rating and review websites, I literally own one, are a true reflection or mirror into the company culture from the outside. So when you're taking a look at things like the Glassdoors of the world, you know, when you meet with or talk with candidates, with the organization, with people within the organization, etc., do you have them take a look at those sites and help them understand that this is really what people actually think of your company? And then what do you help them do with it, not only from a culture creation standpoint, but also a recruiting standpoint? And Brandy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question and observation. And it's interesting, a lot of times when I'm working with clients, they've already done that research and they're calling me because they know that something is amiss. We've got a client right now who part of the reason that they called me is 7 of the past 9 years, they've been an employer of choice in their area. And they haven't been meeting the standards that they need to be nominated to be able to do that. So yeah, they felt a little bit of pain in terms of being able to attract talent. They're like, man, what is going on? So they looked at Glassdoor and they actually did an internal, they hired a company to do a culture survey, and they recognized, oh my gosh, this is not right. So absolutely, I think that a lot of times employers have already looked, or leaders have already looked at those Glassdoor comments. And it kind of goes one of two ways, right? It can go, man, we really need to do something, which is when, you know, they pick up the phone and they reach out to somebody like me. Or the other response that I've seen, which is not very helpful and is not going to necessarily do a lot for the company or do a lot for their culture, is, oh, well, you know, we just had a bad experience with that particular employee, and let me tell you the story. To which I respond, very much like you guys talked about earlier, you know, there's a perception piece, right? And you need to make sure as an organization, if you want to attract talent, if you want to retain the talent that you have, that is how people are viewing you, right? Through those review sites. That is how people are deciding if they even want to apply for a position in your company. So you got to pay attention to that. And typically there's something underneath that, right? So
don't be an ostrich.
Yes.
All right, LT, we'll finish off with you. We have just a few minutes left. What's your take on that?
Basically, I always like to tell everyone that we all leave a digital imprint, and anything that is positive, likewise negative, can be found on the internet. I agree everything with Brandy said. You know, companies check on the employees or people that are applying for jobs all the time to see who they are. Well, now candidates are doing the same thing for the companies. So it's very important that people take off the mask and be real. It's 2020, it's apropos. Get some clarity on what's going to happen, because the only thing that's going to come out of it is you're going to become better, right? Whether you're a candidate, we're saying you got to prepare. We have people that are C-level. I don't need to review my resume, and they've got a 10-page resume and they've got everything on it. They don't know certain things because they haven't, you know, interviewed in a long time. It's likewise, the company may have been doing great, they have to go back to the board and refresh their screens and see what they have and listen to their customers and listen to everyone from the receptionist, the mailroom, the janitor, all the way up, because you never know where a great idea is going to come from.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, both very much. And for those of you in the audience, I just want to let you know about the special offerings that both of them would like to give you. So after this call, you will receive the company culture checklist, as well as the free offboarding ebook. So make sure you look for those in your email, the ones that you use to register for this webinar. And lastly, if you are an HR professional, please go out to HR Company Store and register as an HR professional and tell people what you think of the vendors that you do business with today, because your input is extremely valuable, not only to help them with their culture, but also help them provide you better service and better business. So with that, ladies, we have about 2 minutes left. So I would like to say thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. I do appreciate both of you. Thank you for taking the time to put together this amazing webinar. I hope all the folks on the call have gotten a lot of value out of it, because I know I have. And it's been great, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you.
And thank you, Lori. You did an awesome job. Thank you, LT.
Very great job. Thank you, as always. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you attending.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Thank you.